Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and happy Halloween to all of you. Hope you guys are having a fantastic holiday overall. Look, I know I'm very behind in terms of movie reviews. I'll just go ahead and say it right now. I'm like a month behind in terms of stuff. I'm going to try to catch up as much as I can this week in terms of movie reviews and things like that. But you know what? I figured it's Halloween. I know that I'm kind of out of order. I usually go in order of like when things are released and when I saw them. But it's Halloween. I don't know a better time to talk about this movie, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So with that being said, let's talk about Halloween Kills. And this, of course, does take place literally right after the events of the 2018 film. Laurie, Karen, and Allison, they all are under the assumption that Michael Myers is gone, that, he's now been put to rest, and now they can recover from it. Little do they know, he has, in fact, come out of the rubble and the whole, fire and everything like that went down, and he is now on this revenge mission, with more of a vengeance than ever before to track down everyone that has wronged him. Meanwhile, the town of Haddonfield basically creates this uprising of sorts where they're going to face against Michael Myers and hopefully kill the evil within the town once and for all. So I was looking forward to this movie. I was a pretty big fan of the 2018 film. I think that they did a really good job at, resurrecting the franchise, but also, paying tribute to what worked in the original film, but also ending it in a place where it felt like a satisfying end. It felt like it did a good job of diving into the madness of, Laurie's PTSD and how she feels, with Michael, how unhinged she is with trying to protect everyone around her and things like that. But I do have to say, watching that movie, I never once thought this is going to lead into a sequel. We are absolutely getting a sequel. I know people talked about it, but I just didn't think that it was needed. I thought that movie ended in a place where we didn't really need a sequel because I thought it was a very satisfying end with all of them going up against Michael Myers. I still very much do stick by that. And actually, prior to Halloween Kills, I actually did go ahead and watch through the entire franchise, and I can say right now, I'm not a fan of this franchise at all. Literally the only ones that I like are Halloween and Halloween Kills. Virtually every other sequel I think is either highly unnecessary or straight up bad. It does a really bad job of taking what I think is a very simplistic premise and trying to overcomplicate it and give it a lot more meaning, and every single time they do it, it just feels so forced. It's such a confusing franchise overall with how much they've had to retcon, but I was really hoping with Halloween Kills they would be able to really just continue the streak that they were on, that this could be a really solid sequel. We could dive more into the victims of Haddonfield, but also see where else they really do want to take this. So I really was cautiously optimistic, especially once that trailer was released. I was really impressed by all of the marketing for this movie. It seemed like it was going to be this really savage, really violent sort of middle parts, and I was excited to see what they were really going to do with it, and it disappointed me. Halloween Kills is sadly, I think, just another example of just how inconsistent this franchise really is. If the 2018 film does a good job at showing, what you can build on with the Halloween concept, Halloween Kills is an example of what this franchise tends to do when they've achieved success. They take what worked and they burn it to the, and they just run it through the ground and are exhausting the same sort of, elements and themes of the previous movie, but don't seem to have any idea of what really made that previous film work. And that's really Halloween Kills in a nutshell. This is one of the most unnecessary sequels that I have seen in quite a bit, and honestly makes me very unsure if I even care where it's going moving forward, but we are just getting to right now. Let's get into the acting here, because I'll say right now, that is not necessarily this movie's strong suit. Look, there's some good performances in this movie for sure. Jamie Lee Curtis, obviously, she does a really good job as Laurie Strode. She still plays this character very well. She's got a lot of passion, but you also see that she has this heightened sense of determination in the film, knowing that, when she eventually discovers that Michael's alive, how intense she is on going after him, how intense intent she is at putting a stop to this. You do still very much feel that from her, and I think Curtis still does a really good job, even when the script she's working with isn't the best for her character. I think she still very much does elevate it. Judy Grier really surprised me this time around. I think she stepped up a ton more in this movie. I really was not a fan of her in that 2018 film. I thought that she was very just kind of like robotic and going through the motions. Here, she brought a lot more emotion to the table. I felt like you really did understand that Karen wants to protect her family just as much as Laurie does, but she also feels very guilty over what happened. She feels this immense sense of guilt for what's gone on, and I think that Greer does a really strong job in this movie. I really did enjoy her acting in this film, and I think she did a really good job, and Andi Matichak is really good too. I really enjoyed her performance as Allison. These three still do a really solid job in this movie. I think they still are very much the heart and soul of this franchise. I've felt that in the 2018 film, and I still very much do feel that here, and I think they anchor it quite nicely. That being said, honestly, the star of this entire movie in terms of performances might just be from Anthony Michael Hall as Tommy Doyle, who I really liked in this movie. I think he does a really good job at taking this character that we didn't know a ton about in the original film and building upon him a little bit. He's kind of going through a similar trajectory as Laurie, where he now wants to be the one to take down Michael Myers. It's haunted him for a while, and he finally is at a point where he wants to do something about it. And I think Hall does a really good job at showing the naivety in Tommy overall, him not really, recognizing what he's up against, and I think he does a really good job with that in this movie, but also showing that determinism that he has and that, heroic, heightened ability that he, that heightened sense of, heroism and things like that. I think he does a really good job with that in this movie. I very much did enjoy his performance here, and I think he's definitely very well cast in this film. I really enjoy what they did with him. Unfortunately, the rest of the acting, I can't really say that for. The rest of the acting in this movie really is not very good at all, and I think the biggest issue with it is that a lot of these actors, yes, they got a lot of the same actors from the original Halloween film or Halloween 2 or one of the later installments, but the problem is these people haven't acted in years, and so because of that, it really does show here. They just are giving very flat performances. I'm talking about actors like, Charles Cyphers or Kyle Richards or Nancy Stevens. It's not that they're straight up horrible in this movie. They just leave a lot to be desired. I was expecting a lot more passion from them. I was expecting a lot more, I was just expecting a lot more effort from them, and it just didn't really feel like it was there. It very much felt like they got these actors because they said yes. They wanted to get legacy actors back, and these ones said yes, and they basically just went, they basically just gave the most wooden performance possible. The performances that they're giving here are just extremely unconvincing, and I was not really impressed by any of them here. Will Patton's still good. I enjoyed Dylan Arnold as well. I think he gave a pretty solid performance. Robert Longstreet wasn't bad either, but just in general, I don't think that the cast is really that great here. But I will say, once again, I do have to give a shout out to James, Jude, Courtney, and Nick Castle, the combined effort as Michael Myers, because they both do an excellent job, I think, of really just showing the type of Michael Myers we get in this movie. This is a Michael Myers that not only is out for blood, he is out for the biggest massacre yet. He is not letting anyone get in his way. He is making sure he gets his job done, and I think that they both did a really great job with showing that physicality, especially because Michael Myers, he never speaks, but you understand his goal throughout the movie. You understand, just how determined he is. You understand, just how savage he is in this movie, and, how frustrated he is by everything that's gone on. You really do feel that here, and I think that they do a really good job of representing the true hell that Michael Myers puts everyone through, the true evil that he really is. This is probably the most evil interpretation of Michael Myers to date. He is completely heartless here. He shows no remorse whatsoever, and I think they both did a really good job at showcasing that. But like I said, in terms of the acting, I just wasn't overall impressed here. Now let's get to the directing and the writing, because this is where we get to the things that I think really do bring this film down. Now, David Gordon Green's directing I actually quite liked in the first movie. Yes, there was some comedy that wasn't always the best. I think some of it was a bit misplaced, and they did over-rely on it a bit. But I think Green, you got the sense he was a fan of the franchise. He knew it worked. When it had to be scary, it definitely was scary. I think he definitely combined both of those elements very well. He gave the film a heart and soul. And here, it feels like he just doesn't really know what to do anymore when it comes to the directing. He does still have the comedy, but it's a little bit more sporadic this time around, so it does feel like he's listened to complaints from others. When it comes to that, but in general, he's clearly trying to give this film like a darker edge to it. He's taking this a lot more seriously, and the problem is it just doesn't really work. It feels very forced. It doesn't really feel like it's in the same franchise. It feels like the movie is trying to act like, you know, everything that's going on here is a much bigger deal than it really is, and I just don't think he conveyed it very well here. I wasn't overall impressed by his directing. To be honest with you, I think they really did need another director for this one. I know people enjoyed his directing in the first movie, but here it just felt kind of like there was a miscommunication to me. I wouldn't say it's like terrible directing, but it just felt like he was off his mark here. He didn't really know what he wanted to do. He didn't know how to convey the true darkness that he wanted to go for in this movie, and so it just felt very forced to me. So I don't think he did a great job with that. But easily the biggest issue with this entire movie has to be the screenplay. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of issues with this movie, but I think the biggest one that I could really chalk it up to is that it's pretty clear to me they just had no idea where they wanted to go with this as a franchise. I don't think they initially wrote this with, a franchise in mind. It seems pretty clear to me that, the 2018 film they wrote as, okay, we could continue, but we also can stop here. And then they just, wrote these other two sequels. And if this is any indication of what we're going to get moving forward, I am not excited at all, because the screenplay here is just so half-assed, but also I think one of the most frustrating screenplays I've really watched all year, because when you come into Halloween Kills, there are a couple things that you are expecting. I'll tell you what very much does work. Michael Myers in this movie very much does work. We'll get more to that side of things in a little bit. The problem is, as much as I do enjoy the characters of Laurie, Karen, and Allison, and they do some really good stuff with these characters, they're really not in this movie all that much. All of them have, I think, probably like around 15 to 20 minutes of screen time each. We do get more, like I said, into Karen's guilt and how she feels, when it comes to not believing her mom and how she's kind of blaming herself for that. And then we see Allison is very much going on this vigilante sort of mission. She wants to join, this, she wants to join this mob of sorts that's going after Michael Myers, and she feels like directly responsible for a lot of what's gone down in that previous movie. And again, all of that is really good. I think when the movies focus on those characters, it's actually pretty good, because I enjoy watching those characters. I want to see more of them. These are supposed to be like our emotional anchors throughout the story. At least I definitely got that sense that that's what they're trying to do. But like I said, for some reason, they are not the focus of this movie. You know what the focus of this movie is? Random fucking townspeople that we've barely even seen. I just don't know what they were really thinking here. Like, how do you write the first movie and then you get to this one, you say, all those things that worked about that first movie, yeah, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on just these random people. And look, some of them obviously aren't random. There's a lot of legacy characters here. There's a lot of alumni, but it just feels very forced overall. I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to tell this story about mob mentality and just how bad it can really be, how it can really run rampant, throughout a town, and how it can get to a point where, there's this motivation and they end up becoming the true evil. They become just as bad. I totally understand that, but the way that they go about it, it all just feels really silly, honestly. The mission that they're going on, I understand why they're doing it, but they really stretch it out for a long time, and a lot of the motivations towards these characters as well, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense with what they're trying to do with them. Like Tommy Doyle, okay, I understand, Laurie was his babysitter. He wants to do this for her. He wants to kind of lead this, wrangle up this group, and he feels like he needs to take on Michael Myers, but a lot of these other characters weren't really that involved with Michael, so it doesn't really make sense why they are, why they have the same sort of like PTSD that Laurie did. It feels like, the first movie, they did a really good job at conveying like this real sense of, this real sense of, fear, but also this sense of, insanity in that way, where you have this woman that is kind of just living in fear. She doesn't want to go anywhere else. She wants to believe that Mike, she believes that she's directly responsible for what happened, and she wants to take it out. She wants to take those responsibilities on her own. And so she hasn't left Haddonfield because of that, because she's kind of been gearing up for that moment when they face off again. But again, she has a direct connection to that character. A lot of these characters don't, and that's why it just doesn't really work overall, and I just don't think they do a very good job with going about it. It also doesn't help that the majority of the characters we're following in this movie are some of the most idiotic characters I have seen in a horror movie in a long time. I mean, just the mission in general, the way they plan about going about this, how they think they're going to beat Michael Myers. There are so many points in this movie where I'm like, you do realize that's like a horrible idea, right? Like there's no possible way that's actually going to work out. There's no possible way you're actually going to be able to take him on, just by doing simply what you're doing. That's just not an effective way to take down, the most evil presence, within Haddonfield. Like, it just doesn't make much sense, but they still go about doing it. And I get it that you need to have characters that are dumb so they get killed, but they really push it in this movie. I mean, some of the things that these characters do, I just don't understand how they ever thought this was a good idea, and I just don't think they do a good job with that. And like I said, I just think a lot of these characters are just not very fun to follow. They also just don't do much with them. The majority of the legacy characters that they bring back, they don't really seem to know what they really want to do with. They want to have them in the movie, but they don't really want to give them a significant role. So I'm just kind of like, why did you even bring them back? I've seen some people say this, and I agree. A lot of their scenes feel almost like deleted scenes from the first movie. Like, they wanted these characters to be in the 2018 film, but because of the fact that they couldn't get them till now, they just waited to put them in this movie. And they spend a significant portion of this film trying to get you to care for them. And I just really didn't, because I felt that everything they said, whether it was like a monologue or something like that, it just felt really half-baked. The motivations just really weren't there. We don't know enough about who these characters are. There also just isn't enough interaction. A lot of this is because, like, they want to honor Laurie. They want to do this for Laurie. She's in, like, critical condition throughout the majority of this movie, so they really want to help her. But they barely interact with her throughout the entire movie, and when they do, it just feels so rushed. And that's something that really did piss me off about this movie, is that I feel like they have a lot of time to, slow things down, really get us to know these characters, and they don't. They're just kind of like zooming through everything, and it just made for such a frustrating experience, because I'm like, I can see an area where this work. I can see the idea of what they're really going for. But the way they go about it is just really dumb, and it just did not work for me at all. It also doesn't help that all of these monologues we get with these characters feel incredibly similar. If I had to drink every time characters said the words evil dies tonight or 40 years ago, I would literally be drunk off my ass right now. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, it is constant. Almost every single monologue, it's a character talking about something that happened 40 years ago. It's a character talking about something that they're really not that involved in, but it seems to, like, really trouble them, and it just feels so phony. It's like they were given a script of, like, you need to include these words. We're not going to tell you what to say, but it needs to include these words. That's what it felt like to me. Like, it just didn't feel natural. It felt like they had to say something to get them to a certain place, and that's exactly what they did. And I just don't think they did a very good job with that overall. And like I said, the fact that these are the characters we're spending the time with when all the interesting stuff is happening in essentially like B-plots that really pissed me off, because I want to see more of like Karen and Allison, you know, coming to that realization that like, holy shit, Lori wasn't lying. Like, this is very much a real thing, and like, we need to step up and do something about it. You know, I want to see more of that. I want to see more of Lori recovering and like taking the blame for what's happened. But Jamie Lee Curtis is literally only in this movie for like 15 minutes. They try to flesh out Will Patton's character a little bit more. Feels incredibly forced, because they never brought anything like this up in the first. There's also a lot of things in this movie that they very much had an opportunity, I think, to address from the previous film, and they just kind of like gloss over them, and that really did annoy me, because again, you're bringing back a lot of the characters from the 2018 film, the ones that have still survived, and there's a lot of underlying conflicts with some of those characters, and they really don't try to get into them at all. They really just try to move past it, because again, the film is so intent on trying to get through everything as quickly as possible, whether it's a killing, whether it's a monologue. They don't want to deepen anything. They don't really want to dive deep into anything character related, and it's just so frustrating to watch, especially one sort of subplot they have. I'm like, there is obviously something that needs to be discussed here, and they quickly discuss it and they just move on, and I just thought overall it was really poorly handled the way they went about it. They could have done so much when it comes to some of these characters, and they really didn't do much at all, and that really disappointed me, I have to say. Movie, we knew he had some sort of connection to like Michael Myers, but what they do here, again, it feels so tacked on. Like, it really feels like something they only added for this movie because they needed something to do with him, and it just doesn't really work at all. So yeah, I mean, essentially, most of this movie in terms of the screenplay is just a series of subplots, and many of them are just not very interesting to watch, and I don't think they did a very good job with that at all. So I was very, very disappointed by the screenplay here and the way they really did go about it. I will say, cinematography-wise, this film absolutely delivers. I mean, this is probably one of the best-looking Halloween films we've really ever gotten yet. The entire film takes place in one night, and you do feel that tension because of it. You definitely do feel that tension. The kills in this movie, if that's what you're coming to see the movie for, you definitely will not be disappointed in that, because the kills absolutely do deliver here. As I said, Michael Myers has really never been this savage ever, I think, in the franchise. Like, yeah, he's had some really brutal kills, but none of them are really on the level of this, and I think they do a really great job with that. Every single kill, I felt like, was honestly a winner. And when you think they're not going to top themselves, they actually find a way to. They are consistently finding ways to add something really creative when it comes to these kills. A lot of these kills are done in a really interesting way, and that's something that I really did appreciate. There's actually a lot of build-up towards them as well. Michael Myers as a character, you really do feel the fact that like he is on this revenge mission. He's relentless in what he's doing, and I think they did a really great job of that. I think the best way to sum it up is like, think of the one take scene we got where he like breaks into that couple's house. Like, if you thought that was graphic, oh my god, I mean, that is so tame compared to this movie. This film is really grisly in terms of the kills. It's incredibly savage, and I was really happy that they did end up going there. So I think on that front, the film very much did deliver on terms of cinematography. There's a lot of great kills here. It's very well shot. The score here is also really good, very experimental, I feel like, in this film. They tried to do some really different things with the score, and I'm not sure it 100% worked in terms of the scene that they ended up using them for, the way it was implemented into the movie, but I appreciate the fact that John Carpenter and Cody Carpenter and Daniel Davies are trying to do something different here. They are trying to bring sort of this more experimental sort of feel to the musical score in this movie, and that's something that I overall really did enjoy. But I have to say, my other biggest issue with this movie has to be the editing. The editing is just some of the most choppy and all over the scattered editing I have seen in a very long time. The majority of this movie, like I said, it just feels so repetitive. A lot of the time, it's either Michael Myers killing someone, you know, cutting to some random townsperson and their grievances with Michael Myers, or we're in the hospital with the Strode family. And a lot of the time you're watching this movie, you know, you feel like it's building up to something great, but so much of this movie is devoted to just characters standing around, you know, spatting out the same shit that we've seen in like 2 or 3 other scenes, or it's Michael Myers having these gruesome kills. And like I said, one is definitely more interesting than the other, but just the way the movie is edited was just kind of headache inducing. I was like, okay, when are we going to get to this next scene? And I just don't think they did a very good job with that at all. It was just such a messily handled in terms of the editing. I was not very impressed by the pacing in this movie. I honestly think a lot of what they did here could have just been done in like 15 or 20 minutes, but they really stretch it out. And I mean, I really did feel that runtime throughout this. The movie is, I believe, just as short, like just the same length as like the first one, but that movie really flew by for me. This movie was honestly kind of a slog to get through, and I just don't think they did a very good job editing-wise at all here. But I do have to say, for a good majority of this movie, I wasn't hating it. I wasn't. Like, I was watching it, I'm like, okay, this is really subpar. There really isn't a lot to invest in here. It's a lot of similar scenes. It's a lot of, very tacked on sort of character motivations, but I still was into quite a few aspects of it. I liked when they cut to the Strode family. I liked the killings from Michael Myers. But then you get to the last 20 minutes of this movie, and it's building up to something. Eventually we're going to get there. And when we get to those last 20 minutes, I was legitimately so baffled with what they ended up doing. I have not been this shocked in a negative way from a movie in quite a bit. I cannot believe this is the direction they decided to go in. Like I said, I get what they're trying to do about this social commentary, how violence corrupts human beings and it makes them these like ferocious and like savage creatures. It gets them to make some really irrational decisions. I understand that. But the way they go about it in this movie, it's so ham-fisted to a laughable degree. I mean, if people legitimately were laughing at the end of this movie, I would not blame them, because it just felt so cobbled together in the way that they went about it. And they try so hard to like add this cliffhanger at the end of this movie to like really make you await the new one, and it felt so unearned to me. Nothing about the way they ended this movie felt satisfying. Nothing about this made me feel like, oh my god, I can't wait for Halloween Ends. It's more like, why are we even still continuing this? Like, this is so dumb. Why did we go in this direction? And again, like a lot of things, I think there were scenarios in which there are aspects of this film that very much could have worked. I don't think there was any way for them to make the last 10 minutes of this movie work. It is just so utterly stupid where they end up going that honestly, by the end of this movie, I felt what I had watched was completely pointless. I mean, everything they set up in this movie is just... it's done in such an unsatisfying manner, and I think, honestly, its biggest issue is the fact that we already know there's another movie coming out. Like, if they hadn't have announced that, I don't think this would be nearly as, like, unsatisfying. I think it would be a little bit more surprising in that way, but we already know there's one more movie, so we know that this isn't going to end in this, like, satisfying manner in the way that they say it's going to. No, they're trying to set up the next movie, and the way they go about it, again, it just feels so desperate. They are trying so hard at this point to try to stretch this out as long as they can, but they really are just scraping the bottom of the barrel here, and it is just so disappointing to watch. It's truly one of the dumbest endings I've seen all year. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't like about this movie, but those last 20 minutes, oh boy, I was very angry walking out of this movie. I'm not gonna lie to you. So that really did bring it down for me. Overall, Halloween Kills really let me down in many aspects. I think there are moments that do work here when it's focused on the Strode family. I think the movie is actually pretty good. There's some really savage kills, but beyond that, there just really isn't a lot to like about this movie. A lot of this film is wasted potential. It's centering on characters that we really don't care about. It's giving them the same sort of emotionally manipulative monologues that I just really didn't care much for. It feels very forced in every attempt it makes to try to deepen the legacy of this franchise. It just feels very forced, and it's the kind of fan service that really just feels like they don't really know what else to do with this franchise, and it ends in a way that is so utterly ridiculous. I don't really care about Halloween Ends. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't think this was a good idea. I really think they should have just stopped after the 2018 movie, and after this film, I very much do stick by that, because I don't really know where else they can go after this, and I don't really care where they're going to go. I hope Halloween Ends is narratively satisfying, but with the way that this ended, I really don't have much hope for it moving forward, because I just don't think that this is a very good sequel at all. I will say it's not one of the worst Halloween sequels, but when your franchise is as bad as this one is, it's not really saying much that this one isn't like as bad. It's definitely better in quite a few technical aspects. It's very well shot. There are definitely some really solid kills in this movie, but it feels very cobbled together. It feels very hackneyed, and it feels like a film they were very much making up on the fly. Halloween Kills is just the definition of the kind of forced horror sequel that I really feared that it was going to be. Every single time I feel like this franchise is on an upswing, they find a way to go back to just the ridiculous shit that I can't stand about this franchise. This was a very disappointing sequel, and I am going to give it a C-. Like I said, I really am hoping Halloween Ends can be a very satisfying end, but I'm really just kind of at a point where I don't really care how it wraps up anymore. I don't really care how they're gonna, conclude this franchise, because I just don't think it's necessary at this point. But if you have seen Halloween Kills, of course, let me know what you guys did think of it, whether you see it in theaters, which I do think it is worth seeing just for the kills alone. I think that's definitely enough a reason to at least check it out, whether it's in theaters or on Peacock. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.